Living every day in your head for free. You can tap away, but I will not hear you scream. You can break the keys, spread your toxicity, your world outside reality. In your room, a little hideaway, but you let it through. Enough to go insane, living in the dark hasn't treated you well. You're building your own prison cell. Hey, wait, don't waste it on me.
What's up, Internet? I'm Aries Van Dam, Gen X Genius, the Salt and Pepper Savant. Your Shaman of Logic is back. And this is my co-host, Ozzy the Attack Terrier. Say hi to Ozzy. Look at him. Had a pig ear? All right, back to the host. Back to the host. So, let me turn the music down a little bit more. So today we are looking at two debates. We're looking at Dave Smith versus Will Chamberlain from the Piers Morgan show. And then after that, we're going to take a funnier side here and look at Gavin McInnes versus Brian Shapiro. That one should be really funny. But I'm going to have to do a little break in the middle where I'm going to cut it into two videos. So just bear with me whenever we're transitioning from video to video. But let's get into it because they're kind of short they're short debates. They're not really super long. So I think we can knock it out in one day. Let's get the music off and get to it.
Movement, a disaffected member of the 2024 New Wave MAGA coalition, and a 2026 MAGA stalwart who's not giving an inch. So joining me now are the senior counsel of the Article 3 project, Will Chamberlain, host of Part of the Problem, Dave Smith, and the former Republican Svengali and Trump speechwriter, Buckley Carlson. Well, welcome to all three of you. Let me start, Dave Smith, just by a completely random question, which is, every single person that I'm now bumping into in New York City wants to talk to me about the Russell Brand failure to find his passage in the Bible. What do you make of it?
Both your and Megyn Kelly's interviews with Russell Brand left me just shocked and disturbed and kind of interested, but I don't quite know what to make of all of it.
Yeah, I kind of feel that way myself. Well, let's get into bigger stuff, which is Iran and the Iran war. Trump is, behaving like this war is pretty much over, and if it needs to take a bit longer to strangle the Iranians with the Strait of Hormuz and to keep the blockade going, he's got infinite patience. And then he suddenly, out of nowhere, overnight posted a picture of himself with a machine gun, saying if you don't do a deal, effectively he's going to go bonkers with guns again, presumably involving more military action. Again, a lot of contrary and conflicting messages coming out of the White House and the president in particular. What do you think, Dave Smith, is actually happening here with the Iran war?
Well, I think it's not good. And I think that we're, at this point, Trump is in between a rock and a hard place. And if you remember, Piers, about 3 weeks ago, when Donald Trump gave his, he gave a speech after the markets had closed. This was shortly before some of the more unhinged tweets and threats. And he had been signaling then that, well, essentially he was setting it up to say, hey, listen, we don't really need the strait. Other people's stuff flows through the strait, not ours. And then he said, it'll just naturally open up. It'll be a matter of time. And other people, other countries can. He was basically signaling that we can walk away from this with Iran still having control over the strait and who passes, and other people can work that out. I think the major problem there, and this is something that Marco Rubio just said in his interview yesterday, or excuse me, on Monday, that, well, actually, we can't walk away if the status quo is Iran gets to decide who comes in and who doesn't, and Iran gets to decide what currency they're trading in. Because, Pierce, if we do that, the reality is then this is a loss unlike any other loss in America.
I disagree. They should take that and make a deal with them that they can only do that if they charge for American dollars. If they do that and they can only charge the little toll in American dollars, that's a victory for America, because that means the rest of the world's gas goes up and ours stays lower. Ours is actually cheaper because we don't have to go through all that. So I disagree with Dave a little bit on that. Like, this could be turned into a win. He's just got to be strategic for the first time in this war.
In foreign policy history. Even if you count Vietnam or Afghanistan or those as losses, I mean, we didn't transform them from a relegated, sanctioned, crippled country into a global power. And if you control 20% of the world's oil, then you are, by definition, a global power. And so now he's in this terrible situation where all he can do is blockade the blockade. The Pentagon has already told Congress it would take 6 months to open it up militarily, and that would be after the war is started, not with Iran attacking us. And so now we're at a point right now, Pierce, where we really don't know how catastrophic the damage that's already being done is. In these last 2 weeks, in the ceasefire, less has been traveling through the Strait of Hormuz than at any other point. As you know, Pierce, it's 20% of the global energy oil supply. We don't know how bad the effect of this is going to be down the road and how much more of this we can put up with. So we do have to end our own blockade, but then we go back to the status quo of Iran controlling it unless they're willing to capitulate, which every single indication is that they are not. And so not only are we not achieving any of the war aims, but we've got this whole new problem, which is the major problem now, which wasn't even an issue before the war started. I mean, this whole thing is just an indefensible nightmare.
Well, one person who is defending it very aggressively is you, Will Chamberlain. You tweeted on April the 17th, or posted on X, we're getting the enriched uranium, we're getting a stop to enrichment, we're getting an end to the funding of proxies, we destroyed the Air Force, Navy, air defenses, defense industrial base and civilian leadership, all done in 6 weeks, geopolitical masterstroke. The only problem with that is I don't think the Iranians have got the memo about any of that, because from where I look, they've still got the enriched uranium. They've made no pledge to give it up. They don't even want to talk about nuclear power. They haven't agreed, as far as I'm aware, to any end to funding of proxies. And they're still firing off missiles and apparently have a big ballistic missile capability remaining. So that clearly is still something they have. And the Strait of Hormuz remains closed with all the global economic mayhem that is causing. I'm not entirely sure this constitutes all done in 6 weeks or a geopolitical masterstroke. Why are you under that impression?
Well, at the time, Trump had a negotiated agreement, I think, with the Ghalibaf clique, but they got removed in a counter coup by the IRGC, and the IRGC wanted to fight on a little longer. And so now they're dealing with one of the most punishing blockades in naval history. It's costing them something like $400 million a day and is really risking within the next, probably within the week, almost irreversible damage to their oil wells because they simply don't have a place to store all their oil. So the idea that we have to remove this blockade because oil prices are high right now is absurd. Whatever damage the United States would suffer from this, which is actually not really that big, honestly, because we are the world's biggest oil producer, the world's biggest oil exporter. When oil prices go up, there's a lot of Americans that benefit too. So
notice how Will just throws these things out with no backing and nobody calls him on it. Like, how are you going to damage the wells? You can't find containers now. Have we crippled them so bad they don't have containers in Iran? They can take that oil and put it in containers and keep it somewhere else easily. This is just silly nonsense that these Zionists try and use. They're mind tricks. Yeah, Iran's going to die because they have too much oil and not enough containers to put them in. Get the fuck out of here.
But Iran, almost all their oil export needs to go through the Strait of Hormuz. They don't have any ability to meaningfully transit it outside of it. Moreover, they're a one-note economy. They're basically another oil-producing economy. We have the ability to completely squeeze them. And the idea that they can survive this I'd be shocked if they could survive it for another month, let alone 6. I think. And
if they do, we'll just have to put some boots on the ground, I guess. That's how they get you into this nonsense bullshit war. It's always, I don't think it's going to go that way. And then when it does, you're just stuck in a quagmire.
They're in really, really rough shape.
The problem, Will.
We have all the military capability. They have none. We're in great shape right now.
No, I know. Yeah. The problem is we keep hearing it's all about to end. It was going to be 2 to 3 weeks. Then it was going to be 6 weeks. Now it's like, well, it could be months. Maybe years.
The enemy gets a say. It's the Black Knight in Monty Python. Like, the enemy gets a say.
Well, exactly.
Like, if they decide they don't want to surrender.
Which is why you shouldn't start wars. You don't have to, shithead. That's the whole point.
They just eventually they get squeezed out and regime changed by rising up of their own people. But like, you have, as long as they hold on to some power.
Let me finish my point.
Yeah. Okay.
Sure. You've just made my point for me, which is, that is exactly what's happening. The enemy is having its say. We saw the same pattern in Vietnam, the same pattern in Iraq. And this is the one thing Donald Trump always said he wouldn't do. He wouldn't drag America into pointless, expensive Middle Eastern wars again. He has, with the biggest possible opponent.
This is far
Iran.
from pointless.
And he wasn't going to have a never-ending. Well, it's pointless if you don't end up with the enriched uranium.
Because Will still thinks they were going to get nuclear weapons in 2 weeks because he believes anything Israel tells him. Israel's been saying that since the 90s. Why was this 2 week period the one we had to start attacking them? It makes no sense, and he can't justify it. He never even gets asked to.
And you don't end up with any absolute pledge not to build a nuclear weapon. And there's no sign of them doing either of those things. So let me bring in Buckley Carson. Buckley, great to have you on Uncensored. I've interviewed your brother Tucker many times, never had the pleasure of you on the show, so it's great to have you. And I watched your interview together the other day where Tucker, of course, made a lot of news with his apology for supporting Trump, and specifically because of what's happened with Iran. What do you feel when you hear you've got Will Chamberlain there absolutely buying into all this narrative that this Iran war is going great, the Iranians are just about to capitulate.
You guys are promulgating a narrative too.
America and Israel.
Like it's narratives going both ways. Like I hear an Iranian narrative coming from
my narrative is only based on what I see with my own eyes, which is the Strait of Hormuz remains shut. It remains shut.
And it was open before we started this quagmire.
And that was the thing that was the massive miscalculation, which is all the Iranians had to do was shut down the Strait of Hormuz and attack their neighboring Gulf states, and they could cause total mayhem. And that has been the thing which I don't think was properly calculated. But Buckley, what is your view about what it is? And how do you think people like Will Chamberlain have got themselves into a position where they are seeing one set of affairs here, of circumstance, which a lot of other people simply aren't seeing?
Well, I think it underscores that cartoonish posturing and declaring victory 10, 11, maybe 30 times actually has no bearing on the facts. And it's consistent with what Donald Trump has done in the last 16 years, which is completely betray not just his voters, but also Americans in general, and squandered American power that he was actually wielding on our behalf. It's not his to wield alone. He does so with our consent, our vote, and Americans have been consistent over the last decade that this was going to be a bad idea. Now, how they couldn't have anticipated that the Strait of Hormuz, which has been geographically located where it has been since the beginning of time, and in Persian control and Iranian control for the last long time, why did they think that they could control it? And ignoring that as a basic fact is, to use Will Chamberlain's words himself, obscene and absurd.
Well, that's just incoherent because it's totally false. Obviously, the Navy had a plan for this, which is why they had a counter blockade ready. Moreover, the idea that Trump didn't campaign on preventing Iran from having a nuclear weapon is ridiculous. There's like minutes of public clips of.
So that was the plan, to get them to shut down the Strait of Hormuz so that we could do a blockade, like a blockade on a blockade. That's the plan, Will? No, that was a fucking audible he called because he was getting his shit pushed in because he didn't know that they could close the Strait of Hormuz. He even said it was a surprise. Will can't admit things that the president's already copped to.
Him saying over and over and over again, Iran can not have a nuclear weapon. And that's why Republicans are behind him. The latest polling still shows something like 80% of Republicans approve of Donald Trump's handling of Iran. Like the idea that he's betraying his base is just not borne out.
Most Americans...
But
Will Chamberlain, most Americans, for the first, well, I was going to say, Buckley, for the first time ever, a majority of Americans from the start of this have not supported this war. And 1 in 4 Republicans, actually, I've seen in some of the polling, have grown to be opposed to it because they don't understand how this plays out and ends. So we are into very uncharted territory. Donald Trump's personal approval rating has hit record lows now this week because of this. And so I think that there's a kind of there's an asymmetric war going on, and there's also an asymmetric opinion war going on the conservative right in America, which is fascinating to watch as well. Buckley, what did you think when Tucker said to you that he was he felt genuinely sorry and remorseful that he had so fully endorsed Trump, and that had he known what he was going to do with Iran, he wouldn't have done. And I know from interviewing him quite recently that he repeatedly tried to stop Donald Trump doing this. What did you feel when you heard your brother say that, given how influential he is on the conservative right?
I thought it was an admirable expression of Christian principles to apologize when you've done something wrong. He had a huge impact. He worked hard on behalf of Donald Trump, as so many have. And what did they get met with but contempt and disdain from Donald Trump? Does Tucker bear responsibility? Do all the other people who worked for Trump, worked on behalf of Trump, bear responsibility? I think so, in varying degrees. Obviously, it's binary, as every election is, and I think we probably would have ended up in exactly the same situation if we'd elected Kamala Harris and all of her absurdity.
Just would have cost a lot less. They would have had to find a lot less blackmail on her or pay her or whatever reason we have in there. It would have just been a lot cheaper for Israel. So,
but people who've defended Trump for the last decade aggressively at great expense to their own personal safety, their comfort, their employment, their friendships. Sure, I don't see it enough. To answer your question more clearly, you don't see it in America at all. You don't see it among American leaders. You never hear someone say, gosh, I'm sorry for actually being a proponent of this person or this policy that didn't work out, when it's obvious it hasn't. So I wish more people would adopt that attitude, frankly.
Dave Smith, there's another way of looking at this, which is that if it does take 6 months or a year, then in warfare terms, that still would remain a reasonably short amount of time. And if the upshot of it is that the regime does get toppled and the people do get their country back and the enriched uranium does get handed over, and there's a lot of big ifs in this sentence, but if all these things do end up happening and the Strait of Hormuz reopens, but the Iranians don't have control over it and the IRGC gets pretty well dismantled, if that was to all happen in a year's time, would the world owe Trump an apology and say that with hindsight, he showed the courage that no American president has shown in 47 years and he should win awards for it? I mean, is there a set of circumstances where that happens?
So are you asking me if there's a chance that Tucker Carlson will be apologizing for apologizing and then he'll have to support? Yeah, I mean, if for the record, let me say, I apologized for supporting Donald Trump and said I regretted it back last summer, and it did not make nearly as much news. So I would like to point that out. I
mean, you support him for like
quick
a month,
to this game.
So it's really not that big of a reversal.
It was a good 6 months he had me going there. But yeah, that was about it. But yeah, by the way, I'm embarrassed for the 6 months. I'm quite proud of the time before then, if anything. But no, I will say this. Look, Pierce, I mean, if these 7 things that all seem crazy unlikely right now all were to happen, so you got a lot there. We extracted the enriched uranium. We got this strait back open. This regime has fallen, and something not catastrophically worse than it has replaced it, as has been the case in every other regime change in the last 25 years in this region. If all of that happened, Pierce, all of it, probably at this point, a year from now, we'd go, wait, how much did the whole thing cost? How many innocent people got killed in the whole thing? And what did we really get out of this? You're saying we took the nuclear threat, which you claimed had been obliterated 6 months before you launched this war, off the table. And honestly, I mean, if it, at the very minimum at this point right now, Pierce, if you got this thing going for another year, you're going to be looking at what? Few $100 billion of a cost. If you added up the cost right now, we might be at a few $100 billion. Our bases destroyed in the region. How many more retaliations from Iran? I mean, look, there's so many questions there, but the bottom line is that where we're at right now, it seems the only way to achieve any of these war goals are this wild bet on intimidating the Iranians into capitulating. But Will already kind of gave and you jumped on it rightfully, Pierce. Will gave the whole game away when he said the enemy gets a say too. That's right. So he can predict all this stuff. Like a couple weeks ago, he's saying we're going to have the enriched uranium. Nope, that turns out that deal isn't
I still
real
think we
because
will.
the enemy. Well, okay, but it didn't turn out now.
Yeah.
Now you're saying maybe they have. Okay, you just said
Notice how a lot of the Zionist side's predictions don't come to bear, and then you have to just go off their new prediction, and you get stuck in a quagmire where you're attacking for years because it's always a couple of weeks away, and it just never fucking comes.
Iran, you'd be surprised if they have a month left. In a month, when this government is still standing, you will move the goalpost to something else. This is what you guys do through all of these wars. They did it.
He's already doing it
for 20 years in Afghanistan. The
I know,
government
it's been
that
2
we're building
months
up
now.
is doing
This
great.
is why this whole,
I know. That's
quagmire
why I'm
talk is
saying
so
you
silly.
can
It's
keep
been 2
it
months.
going. I didn't say it's a quagmire. My point is that your bet. Listen, I made this point over and over about the 12-day war, and I got ridiculed for it. When I said, look, the reason why that was such a risky thing that we shouldn't have done is because the enemy gets a say too. Exactly your point. Now, in that war, Iran chose to make sure they didn't kill any Americans, make sure that it wasn't something that was going to escalate the war. And I said, wow, we put a lot of faith in this crazy government to do that.
Yeah, you said they had
changed that
escalation dominance
calculation
over us, which is insane. They don't. They
Will,
killed 7
the
of our
Strait of
soldiers
Hormuz
total.
the Strait of Hormuz is closed. Our bases
Was that
are
in the original
destroyed. We're
military
in a
objectives?
gridlock
We
right
don't
now.
get our oil from the Strait of Hormuz. They lost their entire
Yes,
senior
but-
leadership
okay,
class
let me
that had
What
just-
their
about our
military
friends who
degree.
do? What about the friends
Well, okay,
in
so-
the region
and
that
by
were
the way,
completely left
this is-
behind?
This
The
is
friends are
such
on
an
our side now.
arrogant and-
UAE
okay, let me
just
just
left
say.
OPEC. They're going to be aligned
Will,
with
one
us.
sec.
You guys are just,
Let's just
your
go.
Let's see if those bases get built again before you say they're on our side now.
guys are talking
Will,
points.
let's
They're 10
go.
years old.
Let's go. No, they're not. Well, let's go one at a time so we don't just talk over each other. And I'll
Sure.
listen to you too. But so just no. Listen, I think it's a very arrogant and simplistic view to go, hey, if the Strait of Hormuz has had the lowest level of ships going through it in the last week, to just go, whatever, that's bad for the global economy. That 20% of the oil is like held up. You're like, dude, you do not know how bad this is going to be. Have people go, everyone at home who has a 401k, go look through all those companies that you own. You know how many of them are in foreign countries? Countries in Asia, in Europe are panicking right now over this oil situation. The Gulf states are panicking right now. And Pierce, this won't show up in the markets. If you remember,
That was a fucking good point. Like, people don't realize if you have a company go bankrupt it's in your 401k profile, you're going to lose a lot of fucking money. That's the point. This is hurting America, and this was all based off intelligence from Israel that's, 30 years old? Like the same intel they've been giving for 30 years. Literally, they're going to have a nuke in 2 weeks. That's what they've been saying since the 90s. Since the 90s. I'm not making that up. You can go find it. It's on the internet.
during COVID, during lockdowns, with the stock market went to record highs after we were pouring trillions of dollars into the economy. It wasn't for a full another year when the price inflation started destroying Americans left and right, and we have no idea what's coming down the road. We do not know how long we can keep
that's
this
the
up
question.
before it'll be a cataclysm for the global economy. And you're way too cocky about this, dude. You don't know this will be good for us.
You're way too conservative.
Well,
if oil matters that much.
Good point, Will. Which side's the conservative side now? I thought you were the conservative and Dave was the libertarian. So why are we being more conservative than the conservatives? I'm not libertarian, by the way.
Chamberlain, hang on. Well, hang on. Let me ask Will a question. We've got a slight delay between me and you guys, so you have to bear with me because I'm about half a second behind you. Will, the reality is this, isn't it? If I presented a set of circumstances to you where Donald Trump comes in for his second term in office, hits the ground spectacularly well, shuts down the southern border, pretty much stops all illegal immigration coming over that border, off to a flying start. Then a few things start to happen. Then a lot of stuff starts to happen. And now here we are, a year and a bit afterwards, so nearly 18 months now into his second term. His approval rating is at a record low. He's trapped in a Middle Eastern war of the kind he said he wouldn't get involved with. The cost of living is now...
He didn't say, he promised. It was a campaign promise that he wouldn't do that, and he broke it.
Increasing again in the United States. And in fact, inflation has not been eradicated, so it was going up anyway, but is now going to be eradicated at a greater rate because of this, enhanced, I should say, inflation because of this, that we're going to see the consequence of, for example, the lack of fertilizer coming through is going to have an obvious effect on the global food market, including in the United States. So yes, it's true the United States is pretty well oil self-sufficient, but there are so many other parts of the world which are absolutely reliant.
I just ordered some shit off Amazon, and it was like like 25% more expensive just because of all the shipping now and shit like that, fertilizer, things like that. Because I order some food off of Amazon, like it's making everything go up. It's causing inflation to rise rapidly.
On the Strait of Hormuz being open for gas, for oil, for fertilizer, and so on. The longer this goes on, and the Iranian regime's only objective is to survive, the longer this goes on, the worse it gets for the United States and the global economy. And to anyone who pretends otherwise, and for Donald Trump's approval ratings, and for the Republicans' chances of hanging on to either a half of Congress in November. And I think that the longer this goes on now, we're nearly into May, then June, July, August. I mean, you're into the midterms before you know it. This becomes politically and economically unbelievably damaging for Donald Trump. You must see that.
Yeah, we didn't want to hear him anyway.
Sorry, Will, I can't hear you. Can you?
Yeah, I think you got muted,
sorry.
Will.
I lost my mic for a second. Sorry.
You seem to have self-muted, which is a new phenomenon.
No, I just randomly hit my cord. I agree with your basic statement. The idea that if this war is still going and nothing has changed in 6 months, and this is the status quo in November, you're right. It will not be good for the midterms. It will not be good for the president. I just think the odds of that are incredibly, incredibly small. Again, the war has only been going on for 2 months. The blockade's been in place for less than 2 weeks, roughly 2 weeks, which is roughly around the time, analysts that I were seeing, around 2 weeks is when the oil storage wells start to fill up. And, again, we're seeing these interesting mixed signals from the Iranian regime. Remember, it was only like a week and a half ago when you brought up that post I made, when Syed Aragchi went on Twitter and said the Straits of Hormuz are open. And then immediately that got swept aside because there's an IRGC counter coup. Like there's a lot has happened in the last 2 months, and it's happened very rapidly.
And who started all that? Who started all that chaos? Us. We started it because Israel told us to.
And there's a lot of uncertainty about, especially inside Iran. And so whatever you guys talk about, this is sort of what I meant when I was saying conservatism. It's whatever you guys talk about, we don't know the broader impacts on the whole global economy of 20% bump in oil prices. Like, how can you not see that the effects on Iran of the Strait of Hormuz are much more dramatic when they lose the entirety of their ability to export oil, and it's their entire economy?
Wait, but Will, I think I'm glad you asked that question, because I think this kind of gets at the heart of it, because it's not a question of, well, if we're damaging ourselves, but we're damaging them more, therefore that's good. Like we have the military capability to blow up the entire world many times over. But if we were to do that, we wouldn't say, hey, that was a military victory because we blew a bunch of stuff up. The point is that we're no closer to any of the war aims than we were at the beginning. And now we have a whole new problem that we didn't even have back then. And by the way, those problems weren't nearly enough to launch a war of aggression over. The whole thing is madness. And you can sit here and try to spin it however you want to, but the bottom line is that the commander-in-chief who you're supporting here has declared victory, as Buckley put it, multiple times already, declared the thing over, made all types of threats that he's not even following through on, threatening war crimes and terrorism, and then just backing off of that, the whole time lying through his teeth to the American people. The regime has not fallen. It is a war. The Strait is not going to open by itself. And meanwhile, we're no closer to getting their enriched uranium. We're no closer to getting them to stop supporting Hezbollah. In fact, Donald Trump, well, yes, it is, dude. In fact, Donald Trump had to even start warning the Israelis to stop because he was so concerned that was going to blow up this ceasefire, and he needed to take a break from the military action. The bottom line here, Pierce, as you've covered very well on this show, is that somehow Donald Trump allowed Benjamin Netanyahu to con him into this war, which he has openly been spending my entire life trying to drag my country into, lying through his teeth about how they're weeks away from a nuclear weapon for 40 years. And somehow him and the Mossad chief were able to convince Donald Trump of this ridiculous notion that it was a slam dunk that you could get a regime change through the sky, and that the regime
he wasn't
would be
convinced
overthrown
of that.
so quickly.
You didn't even read the New York Times article. That's just flat out false. Like you're just you didn't read it.
Yes, I did read the article.
Yeah, apparently not, because it made very clear that the Americans did not credit Netanyahu and Mossad's statements about regime change. Yeah, because
Oh, good point, Will. If the president says something, we must believe it because he never fucking lies to us. This is insane. Why do you keep believing people who keep lying to you? Like that's what I don't understand. That's the whole policy with Israel. Yeah, they're just eventually they're gonna tell us the truth. Like, we don't even accept that from our enemies. Our enemies tell us more honest facts than our fucking ally. And we still just embrace any intelligence they give us like it's gold. Why? You can't name any intelligence that's ever been right from them. And I can name like a shit ton of stuff that was not factual in any way. Weapons of mass destruction. Like, come on, man.
Thought it was
For
on
the
his own. He
people
wasn't
to rise
manipulated
up.
to this by
He called for the people to rise up. Listen, I mean, literally,
Okay,
the State Department themselves just admitted we fought this war for the Israelis. This is the most obvious.
Okay,
I just can't even believe you deny this.
I think what
Don't believe your ears. Zionists don't want you to believe your ears. Just interpret it how they tell you. Let them hear it and then filter that information to us so we understand it properly, because only they understand words.
I think what is obvious is it came out of Marco Rubio's mouth that was what had happened. He couldn't have been clearer until
We
got told
literally had a
that he
whole
to
debate
reverse
about this
ferret
3
on it.
weeks ago.
Hey,
lost
and
that.
despite the
We
lie,
did.
Yes, you lost that debate 3 weeks ago. Let's do it again.
You're not. We watched the video that I quoted.
Let me bring. I want to bring Buckley back in, but I want to just first of all, Buckley. But before I come to you, I just want to ask Dave Smith about something that Mark Levin has said, because the reason I got you three guys on was because you all have a sort of different perspective about about Trump, the MAGA, conservative right, and so on. And Mark Levin's been leading the charge, obviously, for Trump and Iran and so on. And he's just called you out, Dave.
Keep that in mind. Whenever you're supporting Trump, remember who his other supporters are. You're joining Laura Loomer, Mark Levin, Ben Shapiro, people like that. Look around and say, this is my team, and say you're proud of that.
Personally, along with Tucker. So I'm calling out Tucker Carlson, Dave Smith, Nick Fuentes, and the other podcast reprobates, and drawing a clear line between strong political commentary and what I see as reckless rhetoric. You can be aggressive, you can be passionate, but when commentary fuels distortion, extremism, or confusion, it has real consequences. This is about responsibility in media, accountability in messaging, and protecting the integrity of real debate in America. Just before I go to Buckley, what is your response to Mark Levin?
I mean, Pierce, he literally goes off on this whole thing about how, like, hey, you can be pointed, but you got to be responsible about what you say. The video opens with him calling us the woke Reich. The video opens with him calling us Nazis. As he, in the same episode, Pierce, advocates for tech censorship because we're all a bunch of Nazis. He's calling us woke and saying that our rhetoric is too far. I don't know. Honestly, as somebody who's read a lot of neoconservatives and war hawks over the years, and as someone who clearly is like opposes them politically, and there's been some pretty dumb arguments advanced by neocons before. None of them have ever gone full Mark Levin. He has become a complete clown, like a caricature of himself. If he wants to call out,
Laura Loomer called for people who disagree with Trump's plan to do all this. She called for putting people like me in a camp. In camps. She actually even used the word camp, I believe, but that's how crazy these Zionists are. Now she even said she wanted a McCarthy type scare, like just like the Red Scare, but now it's just if you're anti-Israel, that's the scare. Like that's what they've got to eliminate from society.
he starts by going, I'm calling out Dave Smith and Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes. How about come have a conversation with one of us? Let's discuss these issues. The bottom line is that Mark Levin is
Zionists run from debates. Will Chamberlain, Josh Hammer, and a couple of people that I show on this channel, those are just the ones that will take the paycheck to go do it. But Ben Shapiro won't go and debate Dave Smith or Nick Fuentes because they know they're going to lose the debate because they have no facts. They have no real reason to do this. No real reason that Israel gets a right no one else does. They can't back any of that up, and they know it. And they know in a debate, somebody like Dave Smith or Andrew Wilson or one of these good debaters will just eat their lunch. So they're afraid to debate them. It would take $1 billion to get Ben Shapiro to debate one of these guys.
Getting destroyed in the marketplace of ideas. And so now he refuses to debate anyone. Tucker has made the invite to him. He admitted this. Tucker texted him, reached out. Hey, it'd be good to lower the temperature. Why don't we have a real conversation here? We can talk about our disagreements. I've offered many times, but I'm sure Fuentes would too. You want to just sit here and smear people, and then when you're losing the argument, call for censorship. I'm sorry. I'm advocating for free speech and against a war, Pierce. That was a lot like the Nazis, right? That makes me a Nazi for not wanting to fight a war of aggression and not wanting censorship. Like, how upside down is this whole world where you could accuse someone else of being a fascist as you support the most fascistic policies that are available to you every opportunity?
Well
Yeah, and also
said.
I think, look, with
Very
all
well
due
said.
respect, well, Buckley, I'll come to you. I mean, would you,
Notice I didn't have anything to add to that.
with due respect to Mark Levin, I mean, his own rhetoric can be highly incendiary, as he knows. Buckley, in your chat with Tucker, you talked about what you saw as the erosion of traditional conservative values in favour of MAGA populism. Do you think we're seeing the beginning of a move back to a more traditional conservatism? And if so, who would spearhead that in the next general election? Could it be your brother, for example? I put it to him directly, and he kind of gave a slightly obtuse response. And I wouldn't ask you to speak for him, but do you think he could, as his brother, do you think he could be the person that can perhaps steer the Conservative right to a different place?
Well, I think he articulates it well and consistently and compellingly. But before we talk about that, can I just say, can we just lay to rest all the lying about how we got into this war and who influenced us? Please, Will. Yes, we all read the New York Times piece, but we all saw Marco Rubio actually say on camera that we did it as a response because Israel was going to do it.
That was the reason for the
Everybody
timing of the
attacked him.
strike. We
Everybody-
literally
hold
had
on
this
one second.
discussion.
Everybody
3 weeks
lied
ago.
about it. Everybody has lied about it subsequently. And then the general counsel or a legal counsel at the State Department published a memo that declared that unequivocally. So it's on record. I think we should probably stop lying about it now. I think
Again,
we should
it's
stop
that was about the
lying about it.
timing, and moreover, like it's the Gulf allies who want this too. In particular, that's like if any, it's like the biggest driver of this. Honestly, MBS and MBZ, both of whom realize that if we leave and if we aren't willing to stand up to Iran, then they're going to be left at the mercy of the Iranians, and they're
But not
incredibly
Netanyahu.
important allies.
Netanyahu's
Oh, poor Netanyahu. Let me shed a tear for him. Fuck.
Never been pushing for a war in
Netanyahu's very
Iran.
important
We
influence
left
too in
him
this front, but so are
unexposed.
these other guys. There's a reason like President Trump is constantly doing all this diplomacy with Arab countries, and a reason they're coming over to our side. Again, remember, like the UAE just left OPEC, groundbreaking moment, really completely breaking the sort of resistance axis using oil against us. This is yet another example of how things, I think.
And now Russia no longer accepts the US dollar. That's new news. All that's a result from this war too, because it wasn't in place before, and now it is because of this blockade. So it's really working out well for us. The dollar may not be the currency anymore. How great would that be? That would be just awesome, wouldn't it, Will? No, that's horseshit. That's fucking bad for us, and that's all a result from this war we didn't need to be in.
think, you guys are blackpilling so much about the Straits of Hormuz and oil, like a remarkable event. That means the UAE can massively expand its own oil production. So
That
like
was always-
you guys
that was
have a
always the
remarkably
aim of this
simplistic view
war.
of these things. That President Trump is his own man. He's not some idiot. That New York Times article demonstrated it. And he went to war because he believed it was necessary to do this, because left unmolested, Iran would endlessly continue their nuclear pursuit. And it didn't matter how many demonstrations of like military capability.
Yeah, but I think, well,
So this war is all because of an idea that was in these Zionist heads. So that's what we got to do now. We just all go fight wars because Zionists have fucked up ideas.
I think, well, hang on. Don't all talk at once, please. I'll come back to you, Buckley. I'll come back to you. I mean, the point I would make to that, Will, is that may well be true. Okay, I think he is his own man, and he obviously felt the moment was right. However, I think that Israel, through Netanyahu in the White House Situation Room and with the head of Mossad joining them remotely, painted a scenario to President Trump that if they took out the Ayatollah when they had this opportunity to do so and the top leadership, that the IRGC would collapse from within, the people would rise up, there would be regime change, and everyone would be far too distracted to worry about the Strait of Hormuz. None of the...
So that was Israeli intelligence. Thank you. Another Israeli intelligence item that was bullshit, that just got us into a bunch of trouble because we listened to it. Feels like the 2000s again. This is nostalgic for me almost.
None of the rest of it happened. So it may well be that Donald Trump, for the best of intentions, having talked about this for many decades, genuinely felt this was a chance for all that to happen, because the Israelis, through their intelligence, the Mossad, the finest intelligence agency in the world by their own statements, that they
Looks like
painted a picture to him which he felt would happen, and it simply hasn't materialized. And I think that may well be the reality. Buckley, just coming back to my point about where this all leaves the conservative right, because it is fascinating to watch the American conservative right kind of eat itself alive a bit, where you've got your brother, you've got Megyn Kelly, you've got Candace Owens, you've got all these people lining up to attack a Republican president over going to war against Iran, and you've got people like Mark Levin and others on the other side staunchly supporting him. There's a real schism now in the conservative right. How does this play out, do you think?
Well, I think you define it well when those are the borders. And on the one side, you've got people who were stalwart, not fans of Donald Trump, but fans of his program that he articulated so well and strongly, and in the face of just overwhelming and murderous opposition over the past decade. And then you've got people, sham frauds like Mark Levin and others, Ben Shapiro, who didn't support Trump, didn't support the populist agenda, didn't support the program, were disdainful of him and the America First ideals. So yeah, I think in the future, I would say there are a lot of people who are interested in having a Republican Party, or at least a party that gets back to the principles that say, let's operate on behalf of America and Americans first and foremost.
If you're an American who votes for a candidate who takes AIPAC money, you're a traitor. You're a traitor. You're voting for another country's interests. You've got to stop voting for AIPAC candidates. They're the worst. They're never going to do anything good. It's always going to be just this.
Easy to do, pretty easy to make America great again if you stick to those principles. It's a shame that Donald Trump hasn't. I just want to say two other things. I disagree that Donald Trump wanted to do this, not only because he articulated it so many times and so aggressively and pushed back against the John Boltons and others during the first term, but I'm certain that right up until the moment that we attacked Iran in this non-war war that we're involved in, he didn't want to. He was resistant to it. He understood that Americans were not on board. He understood Americans and his voters were absolutely opposed to it. And he understood that not only would it be bad for us and American power, he understood it would be bad for our allies, but more importantly, for his own political agenda.
You're suggesting about Donald Trump was blackmailed? Just say it. You don't have to like.
Those are your words. Well, I'm not suggesting that he's being blackmailed.
I am suggesting that he was blackmailed. He is destroying his own party to benefit one country. You can't tell me he didn't know that was going to be bad for the Republicans. Like, do you remember? Read my lips. No new taxes. Who won the election after that? Not a Republican. So he did this knowing it was going to crush the entire party and cause all of this. So that's what we have now because of a Zionist president.
What are you saying then? Or are you just making
I'll say very clearly, he's
accusations and
obviously been
insinuations?
pressured. We don't have to speculate where that pressure is coming from, because we were just talking about.
Just say what you mean. Stop being a coward. Say what you mean. Stop being a coward. Say what you mean.
Interrupt me. I'm not being a coward. He was pressured by Israel.
I love that this little pussy right here loves to call people cowards, as if he's going to suit up and go fight in this war. No. He's not brave like that. He's just brave when he's talking in front of his bookshelf. But he wouldn't say that in a debate in person, I promise you, pussy.
Israel and others around him on behalf of Israel.
And so he couldn't say no to them? Why not?
I beg your pardon?
Why couldn't he say no to them? What's your theory?
That's you can speculate about the kind of pressure he's been.
How about you
under.
speculate? You're the one who's proffering the theory.
It's not a theory; it's fact. It's already been said.
Oh, that he's being blackmailed. That he couldn't say no to Iran.
Well,
That's your theory.
You're asking him to speculate and then criticizing him for speculating.
Yeah, right.
I mean, like, I don't know.
My point is that it's nonsense. He's the president of the United States.
Give him a break. He needs to get a point somewhere. He's not going to get it anywhere else in this debate.
States and a billionaire real estate magnate. This is just Russiagate recircled. The idea that you guys pretending to be such great models
Right. I like that.
rehashing the
Russiagate
Democratic
recircled,
playbook of 26.
Did he attack any countries for Russia during Russiagate? No. We have evidence in front of our face, Will. This is completely different. That was based off of some shit we couldn't see, we didn't hear, we don't know, somebody's telling us. And this we're seeing. We're seeing right in front of us.
16 is just like so telling.
No,
Guess what?
it's not.
You think I have
Well,
anything
I don't know.
against
Have nukes.
people who undermined America for
Yes,
the
if
greater
you know
part
what?
of Trump's first term.
Israel's just taking the place of Russia, but it's
If it was really about nukes, why did he shop 15 fucking other excuses to go and invade Iran? At first, we were going to do it because, what was it? Well, we'd already destroyed the nuke, so he couldn't use that for a little while. He had to give him 6 months to build it back to use that excuse. But we were going to do it because, we're going to free the people. The people you threatened to nuke, basically. You said you were going to end their civilization. How are we liberating them? Like this is all nonsense bullshit. He was going to do it no matter what. I said as soon as he started saying, "Oh, we're going to do it because they're going to shoot their protesters." Protesters he armed, right? He's admitted to that now. But protesters that he set up a little coup to try and get a revolution over there, and they're going to kill their own insurrectionists, just like he would have done, just like he did with the two that got shot here protesting. You can't attack another country for shooting protesters when we're shooting protesters, so he had to find new ideas. Like he even used, they say death to America. A country with freedom of speech, we're going to go in and attack them because they say some peasants say some shit in the streets. Get the fuck out of here. They were desperate for an excuse, and they just had to go back to Old Faithful. Weapons of mass destruction. They're going to get a nuke.
It's a 10-year-old theory.
Can I say this? Well, can I
Russia game. It's Israel game now.
if you don't mind.
All right, don't all talk at once. Don't all talk at once, please. Let me bring in Dave Smith. I just want to say, Dave Smith, on this one point about what happens next. So Polymarket have the current prediction odds of J.D. Vance being the next leader of the Republicans as the nominee, 39%. Marco Rubio at 22%. Tucker Carlson is currently at third place on 6%. I heard Scott Galloway in his podcast yesterday painting a picture where he believes that Tucker is absolutely preparing to run for president, and that with his enormous online following, plus his mainstream media following from when he was the #1 rated guy at Fox and so on, and his sort of more traditional Christian conservative right credentials, and the fact that many people think he's more aligned to what Trump promised to be but hasn't turned out to be, that actually Tucker might end up being the nominee. Could you see that happening?
Oh, I mean, well, if you're asking on inside information to Tucker, I mean, I am the closest to him on the panel. I would say that but I don't particularly, I don't think Tucker's going to run is the impression I got. I would love that if he did. He would have my full support, no question about that. I think that there is this this delusional attempt, which I'm not sure. You never know with Donald Trump because he says everything. You don't know exactly what's in his head. But he has mentioned like at least 4 times that CNN poll that had him at 100% of MAGA Republicans or something like that. But the reality is, as you already mentioned, Pierce, look, Donald Trump is about as popular as George W. Bush was after 2 disastrous wars and destroying the economy. He is conducting a war of choice that is the most unpopular war in American history. And again, Pierce, to my point, we haven't really seen what happens with this now. Now, I really think the best case scenario is that Donald Trump just stops. He does just let someone else figure out how to open up this strait. We end the blockade, we come home, we quit doing it, and we tell Israel we're not going to support them doing any more of it either. I think that's the best case scenario. But even if that happens, I still think Donald Trump is going to go even further down in the polls. So in other words, the point I'm getting to is that I don't think Rubio or Vance or anyone attached to this administration has a shot at being the next nominee. I think if things continue on as they are right now, it's going to have to be somebody outside of this administration.
And that's part of the problem I'm seeing too. People are thinking I'm saying, oh, go vote for Democrats. Look, the only way I'm going to recommend voting for a Democrat is if the Republicans try and shove another Zionist down our throat, right? I'm not voting for anyone who takes money from AIPAC or supports Israel. I'm done with that. I want the candidate to be somebody I can vote for, either a Tucker, a Massey, anybody like that. I would even almost vote for a woman, even Marjorie Taylor Greene. That would be tough, but I might would do that. But I'm not voting for another Zionist. That's not going to happen. So they're going to have, we have a convention where we're going to do it all and figure out who the candidate is. I want everybody to vote for non-Zionists. That's the main takeaway here. Vote for non-Zionists. And we could get the first election in my lifetime where it wasn't one Zionist running against another Zionist. That's what we've got to get to happen.
With the exception of maybe Joe Kent or someone like who resigned in disgust when it was happening. And I just want to say,
libertarian fantasy land. Libertarian fantasy land.
Sure. We'll see. Well, he's already
We can make a
approval
bet at
rating
some
around
point if
George
you can
W.
figure out
Bush.
terms.
Sure. Absolutely. He's about as popular as George W. Bush was. Okay. Anyway, so by the way, to Will's comment that this is just like Russiagate, like if you say Israel has influence over Donald Trump, that's the exact same thing as saying that he was in a conspiracy with the Russians to overturn the election in 2016. Something, by the way, that I have a great
It was
track
that
record
Russia
on.
blackmailed Trump. Do you not remember the P-tape allegations?
Yes, but again,
That's
Will,
what
instead of
Buckley's
interrupting
effective-
Did Russia have Epstein? No, America and Israel had Epstein. So it's a lot more likely he was getting blackmailed here than it was back then. There was no evidence, and we never got to see any real concrete evidence of any of that. There's some pretty good evidence here just on his actions, like that something has happened. He's either bribed or blackmailed. Like either one of those are very viable options.
accusing Trump of.
I know, but if you just let me finish my point, that wouldn't really work here. See the difference, and this is someone who every single day called out Russiagate for the hoax that it was, the deep state attempted coup of a democratically elected president. Every day on my show, I called that out through all of Russiagate. And yet, you know what, Will? If Donald Trump had said, hey, these Russians who care about Russia more than anything else have given me hundreds of millions of dollars. And every day they come to the White House and they lobby me to do stuff on behalf of Russia. And I always say, yes, I always do it. Yeah, Russiagate would have had some more legs to it. If there was an entire Russia lobby in this country who had been pushing for a war of aggression for 30 years and then Donald Trump launched it, Russiagate would have some more legs on it. I'm sorry, man. Just saying that there is foreign influence somewhere doesn't mean
dominated the national conversation for 3 years. You must have amnesia.
Yes, the media. Who gives a fuck about the media? Y'all will do the next segment will be talking about how the media has no influence anymore. So your evidence here is bullshit, Will.
Yes,
no,
but
what you guys
bullshit.
are doing is extraordinarily similar.
This is
all right.
This is so dishonest.
The Zionist ran media didn't pick up on it. Oh yeah, must be real then.
I think the difference.
Trump is being
hang on,
blackmailed
time out.
again. Yeah,
time out. I think the difference. The difference is
say that.
in Russiagate we didn't have.
Neither did
in Russiagate we didn't have. Wait a minute. In Russiagate we didn't have the Republican Secretary of State confirming Russiagate to the world the way that we had Marco Rubio. Let me end
even Pierce getting in on it.
let me end by I've got to wrap it up. Let me end by asking Buckley the question I want to ask you, but in a slightly different way. Is are you 100% certain that Tucker won't run for president in 2028?
I'm not 100% certain of anything. I don't have control over this or much else. So
he's saying there's a chance.
Would you like him? Would you like him to, Buckley?
Pardon?
Would you like him to run for president?
Not especially. I'd certainly like to help. I'd like him to help articulate exactly what the next president should be focused on. I think he's capable of doing that probably better than really a few other people in public at the moment. But speaking of articulating things well, Dave Smith's point was excellent. And yes, I think Donald Trump should do the right thing and get the hell out of Iran and declare victory for the 37th time, and this time actually mean it. But maybe he could also apologize to America and his voters while he's doing it. Maybe he could actually come to Jesus. I know we're not supposed to say that in public anymore, but maybe he should. He could repent for the mistakes that he's made, and he could apologize.
Well, I think Russell Brand would certainly endorse that final point. Will Chamberlain, just finally, are you prepared in 6 months' time if the Iran war is dragged on and it costs Republicans both halves of Congress? Are you prepared to make a public apology on Uncensored for being so resolute in your conviction it was all going to end brilliantly?
I won't make an apology because I don't make public apologies. I actually have to wrong someone to make an apology. I think apologies need to be private, but I will come on and concede error. How about that? Is that sufficient?
I'll take it. I'll take that. That would be intellectually honest of you. I've got to leave it there. Fascinating conversation. Thank you all very much.
All right, and now I'm going to go to our second debate of the day. Bear with me for a second. I'm going to have to edit here, so there we go. All right, here we go. And I'm going to have to get to the timestamp.
You see that
1640. Oh, I should have put the dog up for you to look at while I'm doing this.
Well, two striking points have emerged in the fallout from this weekend's attack on the White House Correspondents' Dinner. The first is that both sides of the aisle are furiously blaming each other for the political violence crisis in the US. The second is that so many people think it was a hoax, a staged event to rekindle affections for an increasingly unpopular president. Claims it was all an elaborate setup have come from the hard left as well as the hard right online. But what's different this time is that plenty of apparently very normal people seem to think it too. And in the weeks leading up to the attack, a right-wing conspiracy theory that Butler was staged became sufficiently popular that both CNN and Wired felt compelled to cover it. For his part, President Trump tied the latest incident to the scandal about the Southern Poverty Law Center, accused of funding extremist groups in order to say it was fighting them.
I see these no kings, which are funded just like the Southern Law was funded. You saw all that. Southern Law is financing the KKK and lots of other radical, terrible groups. And then they go out and they say, oh, we've got to stop the KKK. And yet they give them hundreds of thousands and even millions of dollars.
They were
It's a total scam run by the Democrats. It shows you that, like Charlottesville was all funded by the Southern Law. That was a Southern Law deal too. And it was done to make me look bad, and it turned out to be a total fake. It basically was a rigged election.
Well, we'll debate all this in a moment. Well, my take would simply be that if everybody repeatedly blames each other and nobody really believes anything, it's going to be a lot worse before it gets better. Joining me on the panel is Christopher Rufo. He's the senior fellow, Manhattan Institute. Joe Walsh, the former Republican congressman and host of The Social Contract. Gavin McInnes, founder of the Proud Boys and censored TV host. And Brian Shapiro, host of No Limits. Well, welcome to all of you. Brian Shapiro, let me start with you because you've been on many debates on this show. And they often follow attacks by...
And he's never won one, not once.
...people on the right, attacks by people on the left. To me, it's a kind of stain on everyone's houses, right? The level of violent rhetoric and violent action in American political discourse and American politics is completely out of hand. It's out of control. And nobody seems to want to put a control valve in. Each time there's an incident, everyone expresses their outrage, but at the same time seems to want to pin the blame on everybody but themselves. You know, I would ask you maybe a difficult question. Do you think you look at your own rhetoric in the last 10 years? Can you point to times when you yourself maybe have used rhetoric that you now wish you hadn't? What is the answer here to dialing the temperature down collectively?
Well, Pierce, good to see you. Thank you for having me on again. I would say no. I would say different standards for different people. I would say when you're the president of the United States, you're supposed to be lowering the temperature and the rhetoric. I would say after this incident that took place the other day, what we should be talking about.
Okay, this is going to be a little different than the last one. Brian has like terminal TDS. Like he hates Trump so deeply that he'll argue against things that he is for just to go up against Trump. He hates him that bad. So this one is going to be less of a Zionism debate and more of a left versus right debate because Gavin's also a Zionist and so is Joe Walsh. And I don't know what this guy is. So this one's a different style of debate, just so everybody's aware.
About his mental health. We should be talking about gun control. We should be talking about security breaches. How did this person get to that area? And, you know, I don't like to blame one side of the aisle, but I want both sides to come together. I don't condone violence on any side. But I also need to bring up the fact that it was the president of the United States just several months ago that was calling for the execution of 6 elected Democrats. So there has to be some responsibility there. And I would also say about the conspiracy theories that you brought up, Pierce.
To be clear, he said they should be tried. He didn't say to kill them. He just said they should be tried for treason, which I don't really believe that just for what they've done. But yeah, he didn't just say kill them. He said they should be tried for treason, which is a term, like a case that they could kill you for. So that's why he's saying that he tried to kill them. That's not what he said.
Why is it that all these MAGA Republicans in unison, an hour or two after this incident, were talking about building a ballroom and why positives were put down about we need to build this ballroom? That's not going to help anybody. I don't like attacks, people blaming just the left and just the right. I think it's unfair, and I think we need to figure out ways to stop these incidents from happening. Of course, this was a real incident.
I mean, I would say...
But hey, didn't you see? They had somebody go and try and shoot him in a ballroom with very terrible security. So then the next talking point is, yeah, we've got to have a ballroom now. This ballroom I've been trying to do for months. Now we got to do it because this thing just happened. Not suspicious at all.
Butler wasn't real.
I would say, Brian, well, on that point, yeah, that's the point I was about to make, which is I accept it was clearly a coordinated campaign to get the ballroom promoted and so on, which seemed a bit tasteless. And also, it's not like the White House Correspondents' Dinner could even be in the new ballroom, because the new ballroom only has 999 seats available, and the White House Correspondents' Dinner is 2,500 people. So I don't even understand that argument. It's like, what's the point?
Right.
I actually have no problem with a bigger ballroom at the White House. It's fine. I don't see why everything should always have to stay the same. We have adjustments to our number 10 Downing Street all the time. Nobody cares. It's become a big political potato. But in relation to the final point you made, I saw a similar coordinated campaign about the thing being staged at the weekend, and it just blew up online with people stage.
Pierce, let me just unequivocally say this. Yeah. Those people are idiots. I don't care whether you're on the left or the right. Yeah. This wasn't a staged incident. But Pierce, the point that I was trying...
It was just really, really convenient at the perfect time whenever he was just told he can't have a ballroom and now he's going to get a ballroom. Yeah, it's not convenient at all.
...to make, and I think we agree on this, is that when you have all these right-wing grifters and some with large accounts on social media in unison, all talking about the positives of building a ballroom, there's going to be some people in this country that think that this was all staged. Now, I'm not one of those people. I don't think you're very intelligent if you think that this was a staged event. Obviously, it wasn't, Pierce. But I don't think people on the right are helping themselves any with some of the statements they've made on social media either, if that makes sense.
No.
Christopher Rufo, what's interesting is you actually get into the weeds about political violence over the last, say, 30 years. The Center for Strategic and International Studies reported in September, it said in recent years, the United States has seen an increase in the number of left-wing terrorism attacks and plots, although such violence has risen from very low levels and remains much lower than historical levels.
Because they didn't count the BLM riots as left-wing somehow. Everyone out in the street that's left-wing is blowing shit up and setting shit on fire, but it's not left-wing violence. No.
Of violence carried out by right-wing and jihadist attackers. But they note that 2025 marks the first time in more than 30 years that left-wing terrorist attacks outnumber those from the violent far right. And I think that is a pertinent point, which is if you go back in the last 30, 40 years, you'll see there's been a lot of violence on the right, a lot of violence on the left. But there's now a noticeable uptick in violence on the left. And many people, and I would be one of them, would apportion that, I think, to the ridiculously over-the-top rhetoric that's often used about Donald Trump and his administration, calling him Hitler, calling them a bunch of Nazis and so on. As I made the point many times on this show, if you keep saying that people are Hitler and the Nazis, a deranged mind is going to compute that as a direct incentive to perform a public duty, a service to the country by removing Hitler and the Nazis and expect to be applauded for it. And that's the problem. If you over-egg the rhetorical souffle in that way, you are going to make impressionable minds think this is a good thing to be doing. Would you agree?
Impressionable minds, the left.
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree. And we're seeing really an explosion of decentralized left-wing violence that is being fueled, at least in part, by social media sites like Blue Sky. And in this individual case, it seems that the shooter was radicalized on Blue Sky, in particular by people like Will Stansel, a lawyer who has endorsed political violence. And this is now becoming mainstream. You see this great derangement over the past 10 years because of Trump. There have been, of course, 3 assassination attempts against the president. One came within an inch of being a successful assassination. And you didn't see this under President Obama. You didn't see this under President Biden. And while, of course, there's left-wing violence and right-wing violence, the vast majority of violent incidents and political violence in particular since Black Lives Matter, since the ascension of Trump to the presidency, has been almost entirely on the left. And I don't see the left dialing back its rhetoric. I don't see the left calling back some of its troops. But in fact, it seems like it's going to only increase from here. And maybe it's looking like a reprise of the late 60s and early 70s when you would have mass amounts of left-wing violence. In some years, up to more than 2,000 bombing attacks per year. If you read Days of Rage, it's a great book about this. That's my fear, is that we're going into an internet decentralized new version of the Days of Rage from the late 60s and early 70s.
Yeah, Joe Walsh, that's my fear. And I think AI is going to make this a lot worse because it'll become increasingly hard to be able to tell reality from fiction. And so people will have their natural political bias sort of cemented and fermented by AI in a way that I think is going to get increasingly dangerous. What do you feel about this, Joe? Again, you've been on the show many times. We've talked about all sorts of incidents. People naturally gravitate to their own political bias most of the time. But the rise in the volume of these incidents, the tone of the rhetoric. I mean, for Donald Trump,
I know they said he's a Republican. Joe Walsh is not a Republican. He's a rhino. There's a difference.
I think what happened at the weekend was disgusting and appalling, and the twisted manifesto of the shooter was repellent to read. And he'd clearly been whipped up into thinking he had to attack Trump and his top people because of what he'd seen and heard from people deliberately using inflammatory rhetoric, which is wrong. But at the same time, it's only a week or so since Donald Trump was brazenly posting on X about wanting to annihilate 90 million Iranians, right? So, at what point do we accept that the rhetoric on all sides about almost everything has got out of control?
Pierce, I think you nailed it at the top, and you just nailed it again right there. It is out of control, and it is of both sides, all of us. It feels every day like we are a nation at each other's throats. And I think the data backs that up. We're at a point in American history now where, and it didn't always used to be this way, we hate the people we disagree with. Way too many of us do. And the destination when you're on that road of hate, like you hate the people you disagree with, the final destination, Pierce, there is violence. And that's where we are right now. Again, at each other's throats, plenty of blame to go on both sides. Whenever something like what happened Saturday night happens, Pierce, right away we go to our partisan corners. I think about the very night that Charlie Kirk was assassinated. The very night Donald Trump and so many others went on TV that night and blamed half the country for the murder, the entire left for the murder. Trump's not the only one that does that. We've got to stop doing that, because this is really, really dangerous. And look, I know Chris Rufo is so expert on a lot of this data, but Pierce, right-wing violence over the last 20 to 30 years has typically outweighed left-wing violence. We've seen a spike.
Only when you don't count all the left-wing violence. Like, I promise you there's more left-wing violence than right-wing violence. You just got to count it all. If you're not counting riots that are done exclusively by leftists, then you're not counting all the violence. Like, that's insane.
Spike since Trump got elected in 24, I think a reaction to Trump, and it's got to be called out by everybody.
Okay, Gavin McInnes, you're an interesting person
I told you he was a rhino
to have on for this debate, because I think by your own admission, when you were setting up the Proud Boys, you said a lot of stuff which you've now regretted saying. I think you used a lot of incendiary rhetoric about all manner of things.
No.
You haven't regretted it?
Everything I said that sounded violent was a reaction to violence, but the SPLC and the ADL would take these quotes out of context and say, oh, he's a Nazi calling for random violence. We don't call for random violence. All the times I've said punch someone in the face, it's been a reaction to Antifa punching us in the face. I mean, I don't think a lot of the pundits out there have been outside. In 2015, 2016, we were getting attacked on a regular basis. I was getting jumped, and I always said, fight back. I never called for random violence. No one on the right calls for random violence. That's a myth. This whole both sides are flawed. No, the left is flawed, and right-wing violence is a myth. All of this.
The left says punch a Nazi in the face, and the right says defend yourself. That's the difference here. And then they'll still try and act like the right is violent for saying defend yourself.
Stuff about, there was a shooting at Dollar General. That guy's a nut. That's a Nazi who wants all blacks to die and go back to Africa, denying the Holocaust. That's not our guys. We eschew our radicals. The left embraces their radicals. They embrace the trans. They even embrace jihad, where they go global intifada. So we're the good guys. They're the bad guys. It's not an even keel here.
All right, Brian Shapiro, we massively misunderstood the Proud Boys. They are a force for peace and harmony.
Here we go.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, first of all, what an imbecile to bring up trans people. We're talking about violence. What the hell does trans have
Who's doing the shootings now? Everybody doing shootings are kind of that.
to do with what we're talking about right now? That's number
46
one.
deaths
Number-
since
People are
Hold on,
2018.
I'm not
the
done
most
yet.
violent
Trans
I'm
group in
not
the
people
done
United
yet.
States.
killed
I'm not done
in
yet.
mass
I'm not
shootings.
done yet.
46 people.
I'm not done yet. First
They
of all,
killed
of all the
20
mass
people
shootings-
per
capita,
First of all,
committing
guys,
the most
guys,
mass
you gotta
shootings
let me
of any
talk. I didn't
demographic.
interrupt you.
Now who's the imbecile, Brian?
Gotta let me talk. First of all, of all the mass shootings in this country, we're going years and years. Less than 1%, less than a fraction of them have been mass shooters. So you
That's the point. That their total population is like 0.01% of the population, and that's what you're seeing on the news all the time now. That's the disproportionality we're talking about.
guys are lying. Number one. Number two, was that Antifa on January 6th,
capita,
Mr. Proud
buddy.
Boy member? Was that Antifa that was responsible for January 6th when 140 officers were beaten? Was that Antifa?
They were
Are
beaten
those the
for
people that were
shooting at
responsible?
protesters. They were
All
beaten
right,
for
yeah.
they were beaten for
700
flashlights. People
right.
were going, stop.
Right.
2 patriots died that day.
Guess what?
Rosin Boyle and
Guess
Ashley
what?
Babbitt.
Okay, hold on
by
a second.
Your cops,
Stand
by
back.
your Capitol Police, your affirmative action hires
Okay,
killed
hold
patriots
on.
that day.
Hold on a second. Stand back and stand by for one moment. Let me just finish this for a moment, sir. Okay,
I
it has
am.
been
I'm standing
proven
down,
in
believe
a
me.
court. Yeah. It was proven in a court of law. There were over 700 people that were convicted. They had the opportunity to defend themselves. Those were
The
right-wing
same court of
fringe
law that
groups.
gave Enrique
And you are
Tarrio 22
complicit.
years for not being there?
Enrique Tarrio is an imbecile. If that's the hill that you're going to
Yeah, 22 years for something you didn't even go to.
He should go
die
to
on,
jail
then you
for
have
that
a
then.
problem, sir.
22 years.
Yeah. Oh, he was convicted of seditious conspiracy and dump. Let me ask you a question. If you beat a cop on January 6th, are you a hostage and a patriot? Yes
They
or
didn't
no?
beat cops. Cops were shooting flashbang
what?
grenades into the crowd. They were going, stop
This
starting
guy-
a riot.
Wait,
Capitol
hold on,
Police,
hold on.
who were going
hold on.
under Nancy
You're
Pelosi's
saying cops-
instructions.
Wait, I want you to say this on Pierce Morgan's show right now on the record. Are you saying
Okay.
cops were not beaten on January 6th? Yes or no?
I'm saying cops started a riot, and in a melee,
That's not what I
people
asked.
get hurt.
I don't care what your opinion. Were cops beaten on
Shut up
January
with your
6th? Yes or no?
carefully
Hey,
crafted
Pierce,
questions
you won't
to make
answer the
me
question.
crap on
Pierce,
cops.
can I
You won't
say
answer the
one
question.
You don't know what happened.
Don't
You don't
answer
get
it.
outside. I'm out there.
Pierce-
I'm there. I'm on the streets.
Pierce-
I see this violence.
Pierce-
I'm not outside.
Let me bring in. All right, hang on.
Can I
Time
say
out.
one thing?
Let me bring in Joe Walsh.
I just want to, Pierce, I just want to say one thing, and this is our problem. That clip right there between Gavin and Brian, that will go viral. And Chris and I just sort of sitting here, and maybe we're going to talk about crime stats and compare data. Nobody will pay attention to that. But the argument and the fight right there, Pierce, between Brian and Gavin will explode because so many people tune into shows
So you should be more interesting. Start arguing the right side and be more interesting.
like this. And Pierce, I think you do a great job. I really do of trying to have conversations. But so many people tune into shows like this to see the fights, the viral clips. And then away we go down that road where we hate each other and violence.
What do you think the American Revolution
You know-
was? It was a fight. This country was founded on fights. They're healthy.
I've got no problem, Gavin, with good political infighting. Yes, I've got no problem.
what we're doing.
with that. I know what the country was founded upon.
Okay, I agree. So, Joe,
Well,
I agree with what you just said.
Go ahead, Pierce.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, go on, Brian.
I was just saying, listen, I respect Joe Walsh so much, and I agree with what he just said. The only point that I was trying to make to Gavin is that there's violence in all different places, right? But if you're going to tell us that cops weren't beaten on January 6th, and some people, not all, not even the majority, but some people committed some very violent acts and they were convicted in a court of law, and Gavin can't just admit that some
Was
of those
Michael
people
Byrd
are not
convicted
hostages.
for killing Ashley
And some-
Babbitt?
hold on a second.
We have one
I'm not
riot
talking
every
about
100
that.
years. You have a riot a year for 100
Gavin.
years, and we have to keep hearing
Gavin.
about January 6th, January 6th. Oh,
I know
no,
you don't want
that
Gavin,
riot that
Gavin,
ended the world.
I can tell you right now, Gavin, here's the difference. Black Lives Matter. Let's talk about that for a moment because I know you love talking about that. Anybody who
Marxist
beat anybody
scam,
on January
killed
hold on,
25
Gavin.
people.
Gavin, let me finish. Anybody during a Black Lives Matter protest that committed any violent acts, it's wrong. and I want them held to the highest extent of the law. I don't blame.
Were they? Were they held to the account? No, they weren't. They just let them go because that's not an issue. It's only an issue when it's conservatives doing it because that's the ones that are violent because you don't count the ones when they do it. That's the whole point.
Blame our court system. I don't blame anybody but the people who committed those violent acts. Why won't you say the same about January 6th?
Because BLM started the fight. Patriots did not start January 6th. BLM and Antifa started a 2-year fight that burned down this country, caused $3 billion worth of damage, cost 25 plus lives. The only major deaths, the only deaths on January 6th
So guys,
were Capitol Police killing patriots.
Not true.
Yet we have to
Not
hear
true.
about this. Why aren't I hearing about the jihadist deaths of the past 10 years or the trans shooting of the past 10 years? We are on this scrutiny where we go through conservative behavior with a fine-tooth comb.
So
and we
quick
have
point
to
I want to make,
nail to the
Gavin.
cross for January 6th. Yet you guys
People were put in jail for 4 years and then probably longer sentences. He just got them out after the 4 years, but they were in there for 4 years for battery on a police officer. I worked local police. Do you know what that charge gets you whenever you do that, like in public, in like your city or town or whatever? It was 3 nights in jail if you couldn't afford $100 fine. That's what it is if you do it in America versus if you do it in the Capitol. 4 years, and you got to get a pardon to get out.
get away with an assassination attempt from 2 days ago.
All right, hold on.
Paul
Okay, so
Allen's
Gavin, quick
manifesto
point.
sounded like your show. You guys are in bed
Quick
with
point
your
I wanna
extremists.
make.
We eschew ours.
No, you're not. Gavin, quick point
No,
I
I'm
just want to
not.
make
Oh
to
yeah,
the panel.
I
to
love
Joe.
synagogue
Gavin,
shootings. I'm
Gavin,
totally down with that.
Gavin, just be quiet for 20 seconds. I just want to make a quick point here. So, guys, this is what Joe was just talking about. Joe, I don't speak for you, but I'm calling out all violence, whether it be Black Lives Matters or January 6th. Gavin, once again, called, no, you're not. You just called everybody patriots on January 6th, you idiot. That's what you just said.
Yeah,
you just called all the people, some of them.
Pick a fight.
Well, you're a
Don't
moron
pick a
then.
fight with me.
You're an idiot. All right. Well, good luck at your Klan rally tonight, Mr. Grand Wizard.
Perfect.
I actually think, let me jump.
Brian typically likes to threaten people to boxing matches too, but notice he's not doing that with Gavin because Gavin has had boxing matches, so he's not going to do that. He'll only do that to people that don't box.
Jump in there.
That is
let me
so
jump
perfect.
Let me jump
The
in here.
Klan rally. Perfect.
I don't understand. Surely the intellectually honest. But let me come back to Chris Rufo. The intellectually honest position on this is surely that you should be able to condemn whatever party you will have an allegiance to, whatever. You should be able to condemn unreservedly all violence against police on January 6th and all violence against police or civilians or stores or whatever during any of the BLM riots. To me, that is an intellectually honest position. The moment you start saying, well, that side were terrible, when they rioted, it was acceptable. When they did it, it's unacceptable. The moment you start doing that, you'll be intellectually, to me, dishonest. Chris?
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, look, I agree. I said it on the day of, and I continue to believe it. People who went to the Capitol on January 6th with the intention to riot, to destroy property, to fight with police were wrong. It was not something you should do. And moreover, even on the practical consequences, caused a lot of problems for those of us on the political right who want to just have good policy, fight the good fight, and go for democratic changes. But January 6th is not in any way a valid point of comparison for terrorism, violence, and assassination that we've seen since that time and really since 2020. And so we have a wave of political assassination that seems to be this blue sky ideology, seems to be associated with transgender ideology, and seems to be associated with mainstream anti-Trump ideology. The last of which, to me, is the most important because the shooter for the White House Correspondents' Dinner, if you read the manifesto, it's not a highly technical or ideological statement. It could be something that you'd read on the Washington Post or on Blue Sky at the Bulwark or on the Twitter account of someone like a Will Stansel, a mild-mannered lawyer in the Midwest, who had been retweeted by this individual. And so mainstream leftist, anti-Trump, no kings ideology seems to be driving a wave of political violence. And that doesn't mean that everyone who's posting those kind of ideas is responsible for it. Obviously, the shooters are responsible for their actions. But this should cause deep concern because It's unpredictable. It's decentralized. We saw it take the life of my friend Charlie Kirk. We saw it nearly take the life of our president. And I don't think that just saying, well, January 6th, well, January 6th, well, January 6th is really sufficient in any way.
So, Chris, can I just address Chris real
Joe
quickly?
Walsh,
So, Chris, I appreciate
Joe, hang on. Let me bring in Joe Walsh. The one that really incensed me, Charlie Kirk really incensed me. Many things have really incensed me. January 6th really incensed me, actually, for the scenes it sent around the world about this attack on democracy, at the heart of American democracy. It was awful. And anyone who tries to pretend to me this was a great patriotic act is just talking nonsense. But the murder of Brian Thompson, the CEO of United Healthcare, shot brazenly in the streets of New York, where I currently am, and the lionization by many on the left, especially younger members of the left, of his killer, Luigi Mangione, the idea he was some kind of modern-day Robin Hood hero.
Does the right do that? Do we take the murderers of anybody that we disagree with and prop them up as these handsome celebrities? No, that's a left dynamic.
For murdering a husband, a father, a son, in the way that was done. The reaction was almost as appalling as the murder itself. It's like, this guy's not a hero. He's a cold-blooded assassin of the kind that we used to be able to all agree should be condemned by everybody, but that didn't happen. And this is my problem, is I think, Joe, that people's reactions, their sensitive, we're getting numbed to this stuff to the degree that people think it's perfectly okay to say, you know what, he had a point, that Mangione, and by the way, he's good looking, isn't he? What? What? You know what I mean?
No, Pierce, I'm with you 100%. It's appalling. It's disgusting. And it is every bit as appalling and disgusting as the actual act. But it goes to this point, we're so effing tribal that when there's an act of political violence, it's never the responsibility of the person who did it. It's always the entire right, it's every Trump supporter, or it's the entire left. I go back to the white supremacist who shot 10 black people in that in the grocery store in Buffalo back in 22. Not everybody on the right killed those black people. That white supremacist did, but so many on the left castigated the whole right wing as racist. And the left does that as well. Again, the entire left didn't kill Charlie Kirk. A 22-year-old man from Utah did. Yeah. And one quick point on the data, Chris, I love following Chris on the data, but there's been a spike in the last year or two. But as you said, Pierce, up until 2025, 2025 was the first year since 94 that left-wing violence, plots and attacks outweighed right-wing violence.
All through BLM. Isn't that funny? That all through BLM and the riots that were going on across the country, that violence was still done more by the right. Isn't that weird? Kind of makes you wonder who's taking count of these things and counting them as left-wing versus right-wing. Kind of makes you think you should go look into these studies a little closer and see how they do that the entire time.
Back since 2001, right-wing violence has been more prevalent and deadlier than left-wing violence. We've seen an uptick, but I don't want it. To me, the data doesn't support a 10-year uptick. It didn't tick up during Trump's first term. Something has gone on in the last year or so. I give you that.
Let me just
Chris, you wanted to say something?
First of all, the data that you're referring to has been debunked over and over and over again, and so I don't think it's reliable for those who have really looked into it.
Why is Brian skipping in line again?
Here's the critical point. The difference between the shooter that you're talking about that killed 10 people in the grocery store is that nobody on the right, nobody in a position of authority in media, in politics, anywhere else, celebrated that person, lauded that person, tried to justify the actions of that person. Whereas with Luigi Mangione, with Tyler, the shooter of Charlie Kirk, you have not only people online on the left celebrating it, justifying, rationalizing it, but in the case of the Luigi Mangione killing, you have the New York Times platforming an entire conversation, rationalizing it and justifying it. And so, look, I'm not saying the entire left is responsible for left-wing inspired violence, but what I am saying is that those people in positions of authority and responsibility, people like the editors of the New York Times, should have a little.
Kamala Harris was bailing out people who got arrested for violence during the BLM riots. That's the woman who ran for president of the United States. That's how deep this brain virus goes.
Bit of hesitation before they bring on people who celebrate that kind of violence, because that has consequences. That gives a permission structure to radicals, to lone wolves, to psychopaths. And they're saying, I might become popular in the New York Times if I just pull the trigger. And I think that is the responsibility of all those people in positions of power and authority on the left.
Chris,
Look
I
at
agree
Rolling
with
Stone.
that.
Let me
Rolling
bring back.
Stone puts the
Wait a second. I want to bring Gavin back in. This whole scandal involving the SPLC, you said the government's indictment is a huge vindication, and you say the group were creating Nazis from scratch. The SPLC was living off fake propaganda and destroying lives in the process. Now, the SPLC designated the Proud Boys as a hate group for their bigoted rhetoric targeting women, Muslims, and other groups. You say you were targeted by them and sued them in 2019. You lost a defamation suit against them. But notwithstanding all that, so you got a history with them.
It's still going.
Well, you got a history with them. It's still going. Okay, I accept that clarification. The point I would make is this. If we were talking about a report which came out which said that the FBI had been, as we know they do, had been funneling cash to members of drug cartels, mafia, whatever it may be, with a view to...
Which they have done.
Getting informants who would give information leading to mass arrests of these people and incarceration. I presume you wouldn't have had a problem with that. So when I see the defense that's been put up by them, which is, this money was going to these groups, to informers, so that we could catch the real bad guys and bring them to justice. Is that not a reasonable argument if you think about FBI and so on?
Catch
Explain
the real bad
difference
guys and bring them to justice. What are you, 8 years old? Are you playing cowboys and Indians? The SPLC was creating Nazis from scratch. They weren't garnering information. I'll prove it to you right now. Go to the SPL site. What are the scoops they're getting? What is this? They're going to rob a bank on Friday. There was no unique information at the SPL site. It was all just, this is the group. This is what they do. All Googleable. They weren't paying them for info. They weren't paying them to stop crimes. They weren't paying for inside tips. They were paying them to exist. They weren't paid for information. They were paid for agitation. And they did it. The SPLC makes money on photographs of Charlottesville with a tiki torch. They raised $30 million from that photograph. And it's just like this right-wing violence, left-wing violence thing. You look up a bunch of...
They paid people in BLM riots. They paid people in all the No Kings riots. They pay protesters. That's a fact that's been proven now.
Deranged Nazis with Hispanic names, by the way, and you go, that's your side. This is our side. No, that's not our side. We're not Nazis. We don't want blacks to die. We don't deny the Holocaust. Those are lunatics. Your guys are your friends. Cole Allen is your pal. The Zizians, they have the same politics as you. You're in bed with your radicals. Our radicals, we don't even know them. They're freaks. And the SPLC and the ADL has spent hundreds of millions of dollars amalgamating us with our radicals, which is a total myth. Meanwhile, you guys warmly embrace your radicals. That is the difference. You're the ones saying, my relatives can't be with me on Thanksgiving because they support Trump. We're the ones going, you're a crazy ex-girlfriend. I'm so done with your crap.
Okay, but what about some of the things you've said? You said you don't regret any of the comments you've made, but you told the New York Times in 2002, I love being white. I think it's something to be proud of. Fine. I don't want our culture diluted. We need to close the borders now and let everyone assimilate to a Western, white, English-speaking way of life. You said that most women would be happier at home. You previously dressed as a Nazi skinhead at a press interview. You've used the words retarded and faggots. You've said on violence, can you call for violence generally?
As if regular people don't use those words.
Because I am. Fighting solves everything. We need more violence from the Trump people. Trump supporters choke a motherfucker. I mean, how does any of that taken in totality, and that's just a fragment of what you've said on
This
record.
is SPLC. This is right in the SPLC book.
Hang on,
Gavin. You go back
Gavin,
20 years.
No, Gavin,
picking
Gavin,
these quotes devoid of context.
Gavin,
I'm out here. I'm in the South Bronx right now. I fought a guy this morning at the gym. This is what we do.
Allow me to ask you a question about your comments, which is simply at the start of when I first introduced you. I said my understanding was that you now regretted things that you said, and you vehemently said, no, I don't. I've just read to you a number of your positions on things and comments, which many people would find pretty...
With no context to any of those statements.
Reprehensible. So I'm just thinking in the context of your initial vehement denial that you regret anything. Do you regret any of the incendiary?
What kind of discussion is this, Piers? You bring up 13 quotes that go back to 2004, and you go defend yourself.
Do you
sound
regret
like a violent person to me? That's what the SPLC does. Do you want to get specific? Yes, I said that women would be happier at home. They would. Every time I've called for violence, it's in the context of Antifa beating the crap out of us. In 2015 and 2016, they were jumping us on the streets. They vandalized my home. They vandalized my car. They spit in your face. I got pepper sprayed at NYU. I'm constantly getting jumped, and I'm saying, fight back. I mean, it got so bad that Joe Walsh back then switched from right to left to save himself. It was a war zone. And I said, fight back. And fighting solves everything, by the way, is at every boxing gym in the country. It's a working class slogan, you puffs.
Okay.
You upper middle class palms.
He wanted to use one of those words.
Look, I remember those days in 2015, 2016, here in the Pacific Northwest. You'd have Antifa on one side, the Proud Boys on the other. And in a way, it was the kind of mutual combat. They would go to the same place. They would fist fight. They might pepper spray one another.
But the Proud Boys went to jail and Antifa got to go home. That's the difference.
But there was a sense that it was something where both sides had a mutual interest in fighting. And that really can't be compared to a kind of unprovoked and unannounced assassination of right-wing political figures like Charlie Kirk or a right-wing president like President Trump. And so, look, I personally don't want to fight anyone. I wish that the Proud Boys and Antifa would stay home. I don't think it's really healthy. But at the same time, I think what we're talking about now, between 2020 and now 2026, we're talking about a new form of violence that is almost entirely one-sided, that seeks not just mutual combat, but seeks the death of political opponents. And it's coming almost entirely from one direction. We have entered a new phase that is very dangerous, that is being fomented online and digital sites, and is going to cause more deaths. And we can't have people making excuses for it. And we need to have those in positions of authority on the left, including left-wing media, start to figure out how to get their own radicals in line and stop celebrating them after they kill.
All right.
I'm liking this Chris Rufo guy. I'm not really familiar with him too much, but he was making sense in this argument. So I'm gonna have to look into him and see how possessed he is by the dark side.
I want to address Chris real quick. So, Chris, first of all, let me just say this. I'm very sorry for the loss of your friend, Charlie Kirk. What happened to him was horrible. Even though I wasn't a fan of Charlie Kirk's, he didn't deserve that. His family didn't deserve that. And I've called out everyone on the left that has celebrated his death. It doesn't mean you have to celebrate his life, but celebrating his death is despicable. But with that being said, Chris, you want people held to account. I rarely hear you talking about Donald Trump. Why don't we hold him to account as well? He just called on the execution of 6 Democrat elected officials several months ago. The buck should stop with him. He's the leader of the free world. Listen, I don't agree with anybody on social media celebrating any form of violence on either side. But there is a difference between somebody with 20 followers on social media saying horrible things about what happened to Charlie Kirk, which I don't condone, and then the president of the United States, the leader of the free world, who doesn't tone down the rhetoric. Even at his rallies, he said, I'd like to rough that guy up. And, you know, I'll pay for you guys and I'll pay for your legal fees. So it has to start from the top all the way down, Chris. I'm with you. I don't want anybody endorsing any violence at any time. I'm with you 150%. But I also want to remind you that the first assassination attempt of Donald Trump was, luckily it wasn't executed, but the first bullet that went towards Donald Trump was done by a registered Republican. The second guy that on the assassination attempt was a guy that once voted for Donald Trump. So in 2016, will you also call out Donald Trump? I hear you calling out one
So
side
is
of
your
the
argument
aisle.
that Donald Trump is responsible
Had it
for the
coming.
assassination attempts against him?
Didn't
what you're
say that.
saying?
I didn't say that. I didn't.
Yes,
Let
you
me
did.
Victim
clarify.
blamer.
Just own your words,
Joe,
pussy.
yeah. Chris, okay, this guy's not serious. He's going to call me a pussy. Just be quiet.
You
Let
call
me
me an
talk to
idiot.
To be fair, you are a pussy.
Idiot. What's the difference?
Adult. Let's talk to the adults in the room.
Idiot,
Okay, I'm going to talk
idiot
to
is
Chris.
mature. Pussy is juvenile. Okay,
Gavin,
got it.
I'm addressing Chris right now. Okay, so
I know,
Chris,
I'm
here's the
mocking
deal,
you as
right?
you do.
I'm not blaming Donald Trump for his assassination attempts. All I'm calling out and asking for respectfully is people like you to call out Donald Trump for also making the temperature a little bit higher
I'm not calling out Donald Trump. All I'm doing is asking you to call out Donald Trump.
than it should be. I will call out any violence on any side of the aisle, and I hold them to account first. But it also would do a lot of justice to the country if Donald Trump didn't call for executions of elected officials, if Donald Trump didn't say, I'd like to rough that guy up,
TDS.
if Donald Trump every single day didn't attack half the country. There is a opportunity for Donald Trump to bring the country together. My problem, Chris, is I don't think the guy who you support is capable of doing that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think you're talking about a false equivalence. Should Trump moderate his rhetoric? Fine. Yeah, in some instances, I think that's probably true. But I don't think that that's equivalent to people that are setting up in a sniper position and shooting at conservative commentators, shooting at an American president. And I don't think that it's fair to say that the assassination attempts against Donald Trump were somehow part of right-wing political violence. Obviously, when you're trying to shoot a conservative president, you could easily categorize that as an anti-right or pro-left method of violence. And so I think you're trying to muddy the waters because you probably have the sneaking
Joe Walsh used to be a Republican too. He changed, see?
suspicion that your side is in fact the one that's out of control.
Hey, Pierce, let me defend
Okay.
Brian just for a sec. Chris, I think you continue to downplay this factor of Trump. Pierce, we've never had a president who so engages in, it's part of who he is.
I love how this guy is so worried about the silly insults Trump says, but he's not worried about the war he's starting in the Middle East that's crippling the whole world. Because this dude's a Zionist, and I just did a debate with him versus Mehdi Hassan, where he was 100% in favor of the war. That's the logical leaps these guys have to get through.
Is divisive, cruel, and hateful language. When all the Trump supporters the last day or two said, we got to tone down the rhetoric, and yet they don't talk about his
Words are violence, but bombs aren't, apparently.
rhetoric. Chris, his rhetoric is despicable. You and I can argue about how despicable, but I think he's been the most divisive public figure in the country the last 15 years. You may disagree, but my God, man, it's not enough to say, okay, fine, he needs to be better. The stuff that Donald Trump says about people and annihilate an entire civilization. It wasn't just the 6 members of Congress. Trump called for General Milley to be publicly executed. Remember, he sent out that image of a President Joe Biden hogtied in the back of a pickup truck. Chris, this stuff.
No, he posted a video of a guy who filmed some other guy who had a Joe Biden decal on the back of his truck, hogtied. That's what he's talking about. That's that I do miss the days when I liked what Trump did, because that was funny. This is not.
Needs to be condemned by you and your
Okay,
side.
Joe, I'm going to leave it there. What I would say about that is I don't disagree with you. I think some of Trump's rhetoric goes way too far. I thought some of the stuff against the Iranians was appalling for the President of the United States.
Agreed.
Borderline.
He was talking about
criminal.
the regime.
Borderline criminal.
He doesn't want to extinguish all of
To
Iran,
me-
obviously.
Well, that's what he said. So if you don't mean it,
No,
don't say it.
you know he was talking about the regime. You think he wants to kill a bunch of kids? You
No,
think he
no,
wants to
he
eradicate
didn't
90
say
million people?
regime.
Be honest with yourself.
He didn't say
He meant the Ayatollahs.
Sorry,
He did say he was going to bring their whole civilization down. He didn't say the regime civilization, Gavin. Like, that's incorrect.
No, actually, Gavin, you be honest with yourself, because I read exactly what he said, and he did not specify
Trump
the regime.
wants to destroy every human being in Iran. You honestly believe that?
Civilization.
No one said he wants that. They said that's what he said he wants. There's a difference there. I think he says a lot of bullshit, but that is what he said.
I think if he doesn't believe that, he shouldn't. Wait a
I have
minute.
no
Wait a minute.
trouble.
I think if he
Threatening to blow up their desalination plants is not going to affect the regime nearly as much as it's going to affect the poor peasants who can't get water. Like, come on.
if he doesn't believe it, he shouldn't say it.
Well, if you're willfully
That's right.
ignorant
Look,
of
I have
everything the
no
man
trouble
says, then what's he going to do?
identifying some of the rhetoric about Iran was completely out of control. I have no trouble saying that. I certainly wouldn't say it. I wish the president wouldn't say it. But again, we're talking about the bullets flying through the air, and they seem to be flying for the most part in one direction. And so I'm happy to say, hey, Trump, don't support this particular instance of rhetoric, but that's not equivalent to the bullets going through the bodies that are coming from mostly one direction.
Well, yeah, I agree. And the point I was going to make was, yes, I agree that Trump should tone his own rhetoric down.
Was that all-girls school part of the regime? I don't think that all-girls school was part of the regime, Gavin.
But I think a lot of the rhetoric from the left against Trump is absolutely outrageous and disgusting too. You know, when you continually call a man a Hitler, a rapist, a pedophile, all these things he got called on, by 60 Minutes, which I thought was disgraceful for Norah O'Donnell to say that, because she would never have repeated what was in that maniac's manifesto if it had been Obama sitting there or Biden. She wouldn't have done.
Can I disagree?
I will admit I found that funny because she did ask, oh, you thought they were talking about you? I thought that was hilarious.
Can I disagree with you a little bit there, Pierce? So Donald Trump is a liable sexual abuser. Now, whether you don't believe whether he's a rapist,
he's never been convicted of rape.
I understand.
Never been convicted of rape. Never been convicted of being a pedophile.
Brian would be in so much trouble if he was a bigger star to where Trump could make some money off of him, but his little AM radio fucking show ain't gonna be worth suing over.
Alan cited the pedophilia allegations, not Trump's rhetoric. He cited the pedophilia allegations. So it was you guys.
So first of all, I don't know what Gavin. First of all, I don't know what you're saying. So he's a liable sexual abuser who's named 30,000 times in the Epstein files. Let me ask you guys a question. Why is Ghislaine Maxwell still in a Club Med facility? Why is Donald Trump protecting Maxwell? Why is that? Can you guys please give me one logical reason? It's not because she's going to give up names, because she just literally said to her attorney, he's not doing it.
All I would say. All right, Brian,
because Israel protects its own and Israel influences Trump. That's why. There's your answer.
Say is, I've spoken to David Boies, who represented Virginia Giuffre and many of the Epstein victims, who's seen all the files and said he has seen no evidence of criminality against Donald Trump. There is against other men who may well be known to Trump, which may explain why he's so keen to shut everything down. But
so is he a pedophile protector?
Himself.
Is he a pedophile? Is he protecting them then?
I don't know. I don't know, but I do know that in the manifesto this warped shooter had, he didn't say alleged or protector. He said he was a pedophile and was a rapist. And CBS 60 Minutes then repeated that as if it didn't matter. But actually it does matter. And then for Norah O'Donnell to say, oh, well, you think he meant you? Of course she knew who the guy was talking about. Of course she knew it was highly defamatory. Of course she knew it was incredibly abusive to Trump to do that in an interview for 60 Minutes. And Trump understandably lost his rag.
And it was still funny.
I do think it's a two-way street. There is a double standard about the way that many on the left and the media, which is very left-skewed, I'm sorry, it is in America. I see it all the time. I've worked in it long enough to see it. And there is a double standard about the way Trump gets treated compared to anybody else. And should he temper his rhetoric? Absolutely. Should the others look at themselves and think, are we partly to blame for the mindset of a apparently genius level guy who was an award-winning teacher, no sign of any violence, suddenly deciding to get on a train from California to Washington to plan a massacre at the White House? How has that happened? I don't know the answer, but I do know the language that he repeated in that manifesto was very similar to a lot of the bullshit language I hear about Trump all the time from the left. And that has to change too. So like I say, there are issues on all sides here. I got to leave it there, guys. I'm sorry, we've run out of time. It was a really good debate.
All right. I don't usually do a lot of the left versus right debates anymore because I kind of feel like Israel kind of is the only benefactor whenever we're fighting with each other, right? Like who do you think benefits from the left versus right paradigm we're stuck in? Like, do you think it's Americans benefit from that? No, that's just a distraction. So we fight with each other so much that we can't see who's invading our Congress. Like, we didn't even notice that they were going to take all their fucking group pictures or class reunion pictures in Israel. We don't notice that because we're too busy fighting with our own countrymen. So I try to do less of these, but this one was funny because Gavin's a crazy person. And I didn't touch too much on Zionism. So, well, let me get some music on here. I get confused in this thing here. But I will be back on Wednesday. Wednesday is the next show. And I'm going to let my dog take you out, my co-host. So say bye to Ozzy, the attack terrier. Peace.